Welcome, and please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for having me. Like you said, my name is Kim. I come from a township called Diepsloot. I was born and raised in the northern suburbs and then had to go and live in Diepsloot after I matriculated. I went on to study marketing management with IMM and have just completed my BBA.
Tell me about your family background.
I come from a family of 5 siblings. I'm the only child from both parents, so that was difficult. I lost both my parents, unfortunately, to AIDS-related diseases in 2001 and in 2006.
How does it, I can't imagine what one must go through. How did you handle that?
It was difficult, I won't lie. It was difficult, but one of the things that my parents always taught me was to always be able to pick yourself up and try again. And so that's kind of what I lived with in my heart. That's kind of what kept me going every day, just to keep getting up and keep pushing myself. And
how did you manage when you lost your parents to continue to survive, from little things, from paying the bills to accommodation and so forth?
For the first few months it was difficult. It was kind of like living off friends and trying to get from family as well. But then I met the Tomorrow Trust, which is an organization that looks after orphan and vulnerable children. And they were able to put me through my tertiary education for 3 years. And every month I received almost like a stipend, pocket money sort of, to help me with food, transport, textbooks, stationery, anything that I needed.
And take me back to that time. I'm going to delve a little bit further as well, but take me a little bit back to the time. So now you lost your parents, and you're well read, or you read and watch television. And you see these displays of wealth, people making money, BE transactions. How does it impact you? Is it something where you're angry? Is it jealousy? Is it?
I was angry and jealous, but also at that time I had kind of blocked myself off from the rest of the world. So I wasn't really familiar with what was going on in terms of the rich and wealthy. For me, it almost kind of made me focus back in Diepsloot, where everyone is sort of on the same level, so it's not that hard to keep going.
Tell me about Diepsloot. I understand with your new employer that he made you an offer to come and move closer to where the headquarters are in Hyde Park. Why did you say no?
Because I find, especially in societies like Soweto or Tembisa or Alexandra, anything like that, when people start getting more ahead in life, when they start earning more, when they start driving better cars and looking better, they also think it's also better to move out of where they were brought up and kind of into a safer neighborhood, for instance, where there's security, where it looks nicer, where the service delivery is on point. And I think the youth that remain behind in the townships think that's the way we should all be doing. Like we should all just grow up and leave the townships and go live in the suburbs. And I thought, well, maybe I could be a role model to the children in my township. Grow up and show them. They could always almost have like a real life picture of what success could be like.
I mean, you spend a lot of time in a lot of functions, events, forums, in part because of your business, and I'll ask you just now what it is. But you hear a lot of people who are not familiar with communities like Diepsloot talk about Diepsloot and what should be done. How big is the gap between what they think they know versus the reality of living there?
Very. It's like in every other aspect of life, when you think you know lots about something, but then you actually realize that you don't, because you're not in that situation. You're not where people who have perceptions about Diepsloot, the perceptions that they have are derived from what the media is telling them, or from what someone's cousin whose brother said. You know, they haven't really been there, they haven't experienced the livelihood of Diepsloot. And I think that's maybe what makes their perception so different from what it really is.
Describe Diepsloot to a foreigner like yourself. What is it like?
Home. It's everyone works together for the greater good of the community. That kind of comes first, which is why mob justice was such a problem there, because everyone had enough in terms of crime. And so the community comes together to support the one victim who has allegedly pointed out who the perpetrator was. So that's kind of what the community of Deep Slit is about, helping each other. There aren't that many schools in Deep Slit. I think there's about 5.
For a community of 250,000. Wow.
But the youth are really excited to be going to school, you know, because there's so little schools in Deep Slit, and not all of them are fortunate enough to go to the schools. So it's an environment with many different demographics as well. Like lots of cultures live in Deep Slit, but there's a common thread amongst the whole community, and that is just to live for tomorrow. And that's how I think the community is interlinked.
Let me ask you, pick up on the point of the youth. There's a lot of bodies, ANC Youth League, that propose to represent the youth. Without going into whether one disagrees or agrees with their policies, do you feel represented by these bodies?
The last time I felt represented was in 1994, when they had a different president. I won't mention his name. But that was the last time I felt represented, and I was really young then. Growing up, I don't think the Youth League really represents the youth in South Africa.
Why?
First of all, one of the things that they always like to say is we aim to help our people get out of poverty. And they do exactly what I was saying about the people who become successful. They grow up, make money, and they leave their homes. So if you're leaving the area that you want to see out of poverty, I mean, what do you do to help that area? You're not there every day to see the problems that they're going through. Yet you claim you're trying to be helping them. That's a problem for me. The big spending, the lavish parties, the celebrations for everything that goes right or their way, I just think it's a waste of funds and energies, and it could be channeled into making South Africa a better place, especially for the youth.
Are you positive about South Africa or the situation? Are you positive about the future?
I'm positive about Africa as a whole, and I think South Africa is a vital part of Africa. And I think once we start thinking of that, start thinking beyond our own borders, then everyone will be able to see the potential that we have in our hands. I think it also goes with working collaboratively with our neighboring states to make sure that South Africa can be a success. I mean,
where does this positivity come from?
The youth.
But this concept of youth, why? And a lot of them are unemployed or unable to find employment. I are they so optimistic or positive, despite the difficulties that they face in daily life?
I can't say why, but for me personally, I think it's just comes from dreaming. When you were growing up, you always had a dream, a vision of where you wanted to go. And I think if you just keep that vision in mind and you keep following it and you keep putting the correct steps in front so you can get to that vision, I mean, that's what keeps you going. And when I look at the state of the infrastructure in South Africa and the developments and the way the world is now turning and looking to Africa, I think that's the major thing that everyone should be thinking about, that's actually going to boost Africa.
What is the biggest misperception people have of the youth or people living in Deep Slit?
That we're lazy, and that we're criminals.
Okay.
Lazy in terms of, they think, that sounded bad, people think that if you're not working, if you're unemployed and you're living in Deep Slit, it's because you don't want to go out and get a job. It's because you don't want to actually be someone. But it's not like that. I mean, most of the people that are living in Deep Slit now have come from different areas to come and try and find employment. And Deep Slit is kind of central in those sides of Johannesburg, and they feel like a lot of job opportunities will be available to them. But once they get there, then they realize that's not really that case. And unemployment makes people look lazy. And it's not like they choose to be unemployed, it's just that they can't find a job and no one will give them an opportunity to do so.
What would you advise businesses to do in order to give them a job? How would you tackle this issue of unemployment, especially in youth?
I understand that in the private sector it's kind of difficult to just be giving away resources, giving jobs if there's no really particular need, but what the youth, specifically what the youth wants, is to learn. I mean, when we're looking for jobs, the main thing that they tell us about is experience. But how are you going to get experience if no one is willing to give you the experience? And from what I've heard from the youth in Deep Split, it doesn't matter how much they're going to get paid, as long as at the end of the day they're able to buy a loaf of bread that they weren't able to do before.
Okay.
That would make a big impact. And the fact that they're learning, they can use that experience that you've taught them to do something else, or maybe to even start their own business. I mean, it's just about giving someone an opportunity.
Interesting. How safe is it in Deep Split?
Safe, you know. it's on like Monday to Friday, it's very safe. But then if you're wandering in the streets after, let's say, 12 a.m. on a Saturday or a Sunday or a Friday, for instance, then it's not that safe.
12 a.m. midnight?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
Because that's when everyone's coming back from the taverns, and that's when people are drunk and rowdy.
Oh, okay.
And there's some people who also prey on those people, and you could be misunderstood.
And do people watch out for each other?
They do. They do. There's what they like to say is vimba. So when someone in the community shouts vimba, like for instance your handbag's just been taken or something, then the whole community runs to vimba that person. Vimba means stop. So everyone stands up for each other.
Is Deep Split a potential for companies to set up their offices there?
Very much so. I mean, it's a market with, the last time I checked the figures, 250,000 people. And like I said, people are looking for opportunities as well. So if you were to set up in Deep Split, you would not be short of resources, of people who are willing to learn, of potential as well. I do think it is.
And you talked about the community feeling that energy that is in Deep Split. What is your biggest frustration in not seeing that realized into better living conditions or?
I think my biggest frustration is kind of when I look back on where I come from, and I know people normally say the youth are the future and they don't really think about it, but that's the way it really is. And what our parents have left us, the legacy that they've left us in Deep Split, it's kind of difficult to build it up to where we really want it to be. So I think we need all the help that we can get in terms of building it up. And it's just frustrating not knowing exactly where that help will come from, especially when people have perceptions about Deep Split, and you try to make a link between their perceptions and what Deep Split really is. It doesn't really gel together. So it would be nice, I don't know, to get people from outside of Deep Split into the community and to see how it really works, what it's really all about.
And I understand you are actually trying to do that by a company that you started.
Yes.
Can you tell me very briefly a little bit more about this company?
My company is called Deep Tweets, and the way my team and I like to think of it is it's social media causing a social revolution. And what we do is we take youth from Deep Split, from the community, and we train them to tweet professionally, and then we hire them out to forums, conferences, event organizers who've organized various events, and they tweet on behalf of the company that's hired them. And that way it's two-pronged. The benefit that we receive as the tweets is that now the youth are able to take back a different message into the community. They're able to share the information that they've learned. And it also opens their eyes up to things outside of the community, and they're aware now that Deep Split is almost like a world on its own, and there's more to life than what we know in Deep Split. And what the organizer receives, of course, is let's just say an improved corporate image and instant feedback from the target market that they're dealing with. It gives them an interactive channel, let's say, with their markets.
Very good. I'll take you back a little bit, just in closing. You've got said you're a politician. You just received the mandate from the population to run the country. Talking about Thabo Mbeki, for example, Nelson Mandela. and you've got a huge shopping list of problems that you need to deal with limited resources. So with that understanding, are you happy with the progress that is being made across South Africa in your view, in your experience?
I am. It's like they say, Rome wasn't built in a day. And coming from where we come from, where South Africa came out of apartheid, it wasn't something that you could just get over. And even in our generation, the generation that came way after it happened, the repercussions are still showing. So it's not something that you can just heal easily. And until that is dealt with, it's not easy to just fix the nation and make sure that everything's on point. But I would make my priority the youth. Because like I said, the youth are the future. So if you could get them better education, better medical services, just groom the youth, because they'll be the leaders of tomorrow, and then I'm guaranteed that they'll be able to take care of the rest and make sure that the rest is all up to date.
You talk about progress being made. You talk about apartheid, and especially given your age that you weren't part of that, but you felt the repercussions of that. What does it mean for you when people talk about apartheid?
It depends on what context they're talking about it. If it's someone who's still really angry about it, I understand where the anger comes from, but it shouldn't be anger anymore. It should rather be sadness, because it's something that's happened, it's in the past, and there's not much we can do right now to change it. All we can do is move forward, and it would be better if we move forward as one unit rather than in our separate cultural groups. But if the person is talking about apartheid, and when our grandparents were explaining to us, you know, when we were young, we weren't allowed onto a bus, or we weren't. As a youth, you now look and you go, oh wow, I'm allowed on a bus now. I'm allowed to talk to a white person. I can hold hands and no one can say anything, and you realize that we've come almost full circle, and we just need to complete the whole cycle, I think. We just end it.
Is South Africa, in your view, is racism still an issue?
It is. It's an issue in mostly rural areas.
Also,
like in the farms where there isn't much control as there is here, I think. When I say control, I mean like media. You know, the media plays a big role in our community, and there isn't that much control in the rural areas.
What do you mean by control? What role the media plays?
Here, for instance, everyone has access to TV, and you can see the interaction of different races, and you can hear a white person trying to learn Zulu and the black person trying to communicate with them. You can see that the people are trying to get together, whereas in rural communities they aren't really exposed to that kind of environment. And what the grandchildren of the farmers were taught is this is your worker and this is how it goes, and it just keeps on going. So it's like generation after generation they're getting taught the same thing, and there's no one really coming from out here into the rural communities. But it's also, I think, it adds fuel to the fire, I think, when you have things like the spear come up. And all of a sudden it's been made a racial issue. Now if you've just managed to pull yourself away from the thoughts of racism, and you've just gotten to the point where you think, okay, we all won, and then they come up with this painting and this whole controversial thing that it's all about racism and everything, it stirs the fire and it just makes everything worse.
Okay, so you think there should be a degree of responsibility?
Yes.
In final question, you know, there is this, and I'm hesitant to say it, but there's a lot of African cultures and there's a lot of white cultures. There's Afrikaners, there's English, there's European, and so forth. And there's all the wonderful cultures, some sets of cultures in South Africa. From Zulus to Xhosa to Sothos. How, in this incredible pot, you've got a lot of richness of African culture, from respect for your elders to how to treat each other, to the spirit of Ubuntu and so forth. How do you balance this with wanting a more democratic system where more people have a right to question a president where president says, but hold on, I also would like a little bit more respect and a little bit more authority. How do you balance these two?
That's a good question. But that's a very good question. I have no idea. But as president, I think you should be open to all different views and opinions. Because like you said, it's a very diverse country. And as president, when you step up to that chair, you need to understand that there are various groups of people who want various different things from you. And sometimes, not all cultures, you know, understand each other. There will be a clash. And you have to be prepared, and you need to understand how you're going to handle it.
That's interesting. Okay. Kim, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time today, and look forward to chatting soon.
Thank you for having me.